Hello there. I know that everybody's anxious to get back to work on your health curriculum. And so I would encourage you to get together some colored pencils and a pencil and a piece of paper and copy along with me. The video that we posted on the respiratory system was, really just an intro to our notes on the respiratory system. It's interesting to me that most of us don't really know why we breathe, other than it will kill us if we don't breathe. And as you move through biology next year, you're going to learn something about what we're doing with the oxygen that we're inhaling and why it's so, critical for us to keep breathing or we die. So what we're really doing with the respiratory system is getting oxygen into our cells. And once it reaches the cells, it's going to enter the mitochondria of our cells. And what it's going to allow us to do is turn our sugar or the food that we eat into energy that our body can use. We call that process cellular respiration. So the respiratory system's main function is to get O2 to the cells for cellular respiration. And when we're talking about this cellular respiration, it is a combination of the O2 that you breathe and the food that you eat. In this case, I'm just going to put that food in as glucose, C6H12O6. And that is going to create carbon dioxide and water. So we could say that's oxygen gas and glucose or food. And it's going to have an end product of carbon dioxide and water. But right here where we see the arrow, that's going to show us that something else is happening. We're converting this to that, and what we'll get out of it is the energy that we need to survive. So we see, let's just do it like this. This will be fun. We're going to have some oxygen molecules, and oxygen, so you know, because this is going to be old hat to you at some point, oxygen is always illustrated in red. And that's probably because of the color of blood. I'm just guessing. That oxygen is going to combine with the food you eat, and it's going to enter the cells. And when it gets to the cells, it's going to enter the organelle known as the mitochondria. And the mitochondria is going to, and there's some steps before that, but in the end, the mitochondria is going to produce the carbon dioxide and water. I also like to illustrate mitochondria in red. Isn't that funny? All right. And this then gives us energy. And there's a fancy name for that energy. That energy is called ATP. ATP energy is what your enzymes and your muscles and your neurons, everything is using this sort of energy in order to make your body work. And it's not just your body, but every living thing is using the same process that is eukaryotic, certainly not the prokaryotes, but we're not really talking about that today. So we're going to call this system of pulling in oxygen and food and spitting out carbon dioxide and water, we're going to call that something along the lines of gas exchange. So we have reactants here, and we have products over here. So in gas exchange, of course, your reactants are the food you eat and the oxygen that you breathe in, and the products are the carbon dioxide and water that you're breathing out whenever you breathe out. So let's have ourselves a goofy guy here, and we can make him, or her, I guess it doesn't have to be a guy, with a big smiley face and a tooth for the heck of it, a couple ears, and oh, I'm just gonna do a crazy haircut there. And what I want to see is oxygen gas that this individual is breathing in, and the carbon dioxide that this individual is breathing out. And remember, oxygen's red, and the carbon dioxide, you know, it's funny, we think about carbon dioxide, it's got the oxygens attached to it. And if I could find kind of a blackish pencil, this is a dark gray. This is about as good as I'm going to find here today. Is carrying the carbon, and this carbon that's being carried away, these little carbons right there, those are actual particles of your food that you ate. So this carbon comes from particles of food that you ate and digested. And so we've got this oxygen rolling in and the little teeny tiny chunks of food. You don't really think about exhaling your food per se, but that's indeed what you're doing. Every time you exhale is you're sending out the digested sort of particles of whatever it was you ate for breakfast or lunch. Or even if you didn't eat and your body starts digesting some sort of your energy stores, it might be food that you ate last week or last month, who knows, depending on the situation and just how that went. So, gas exchange. Okay, what I want to do now, I don't have enough room to illustrate what I want here, so I'm going to turn my page. This will be good. And I want to say, look more in depth into the organs that are going to be making up the respiratory system. And the respiratory system, again, is taking in that oxygen and shooting out that carbon dioxide. So let's try to do kind of a profile view of a person. And this is always hard for me. We need to make sure we have a nose, because the nose is part of the system that we're working with. And then a couple lips here and a chin. This is going to look silly, but I forgive myself. I hope you forgive yourself for anything silly that happens here today. And we'll just draw that jawline. And so now what I want to do is throw some tubes in. So we have our nasal cavity. Kind of looks like a bathroom faucet. And then it is going to join in with, and this is not, obviously, this distance is not that big. It's actually just a plate that divides the two. But for the sake of kind of showing things like plumbing, I'm going to draw it like this. And so we have our oral cavity. And we have our nasal cavity. And they join together like the video described, and we talked about that on our Google form. They're going to join together, and they're going to create a tube. There's a divider in the tube. One tube at a point is going to divide out and be your windpipe, and the other one, the esophagus, is going to go down to your stomach. We're just not going to focus on the esophagus because this is not the digestive system, it's the respiratory system. So we'll just have this tube going down, and the voice box is located in here. And the tube is called the trachea, or the windpipe. Oops, that's an EA, which is also known as the windpipe. And it is kind of rigid. When you see it, it looks like a vacuum tube. It's made of a material that will not collapse, because if it did, you would suffocate, and that'd be awful. The tube itself is going to divide in half. And each half is going to go down to different lung. So different lung systems. And hiding back here in this area of your body is your heart. And your heart is going to pump stuff to make things move. So we have the lungs. And we have the heart. And this part of your body, if you think about where the upper part of your chest is, that upper part of your body is called the thoracic cavity. Oops, there's an H there. And below the thoracic cavity is the abdominal cavity. And the sort of the thing that divides those two cavities is known as the diaphragm. Oops, that's supposed to be a D. Diaphragm. And the diaphragm moves up and down, and as it does so, it allows air to fill the lungs and carbon dioxide to take off. So there's a gas exchange that's going on down there. So I guess I made this person awfully big. I didn't quite mean to, but there you go. Life is full of challenges. So we're having a body on top of this. And we can see that as these lungs move down, they're going to divide off into smaller and smaller factions until you reach the little teeny tiny bronchioles or bronchioles. And we'll look at that as we move along. Let's see, I want to color this. I think you should color yours too, because what fun is it if it's not colored? And we could talk a little bit about some of the diseases that might affect your lungs and how to avoid them. Our world right now, we're dealing with staying home because of this virus that's out there. And one of the reasons why this virus is so incredibly confusing and deadly is because of the way it attacks your lungs and causes your body to not be able to breathe. It fills the lungs with fluid. And so it's like drowning in a way if you can't get this oxygen in and the carbon dioxide out. Your body then shuts down and you're unable, well, you suffocate to death. You could die from suffocation. And that is why what we're seeing in the news is there's a lot of emphasis on getting these ventilators to people so that they can breathe. Because what a ventilator will do is it will go in and make it so that you can breathe even if your lungs are not able to breathe on their own. They might be too taxed, they might be too full of fluid. Certainly that's not good. So I need a bigger eyeball on my guy. Yep. So that is one of the major concerns. And I want to kind of just throw here a little arrow showing that I have O2 going in and CO2 going out. So that's CO2 out and O2 in. Following my rules, I've got red for the oxygen, and I'm going to use black for the carbon. So we've got this gas exchange happening, and we could draw some oxygen molecules moving in up top like that. Okay, so as the oxygen comes in to your body, oh, I forgot to write, down here's the abdominal cavity. It's pretty serious business, this diaphragm. The separator between these two, if you're in some kind of major accident where, like maybe a car accident or a biking accident, or you fall too far, you can tear this diaphragm, and that is a critical medical condition because you can't really breathe. So yeah, that would require surgery intervention. So be careful out there. All right. So as we move down deep into the lungs, we're going to reach a section of lung where gas exchange actually occurs. And we could say that capillaries are the switchover between your veins and your arteries that happens down at a really intimate level inside of the lungs. So I'm going to draw. It might be helpful to think of a plant and branches on a plant, that the further you get along the branches, the smaller and smaller and smaller they become. So if you look back up here, we're looking at a big tree trunk, and then it divides into the first branch. And then we're going to have different branches as we move down. And they get smaller and smaller and smaller until eventually you reach the point where the gas exchange is actually going to occur. And we're just massively shooting in O2 gas way back up at this point. And it's going to move down and down and down until eventually there's a series of little bulbs that sit on the lungs. And they're teeny tiny little bulbs. And we're just going to draw them like this. And in these bulbs, we're going to have a connection between the veins and the arteries where we're going to have gas exchange occurring. And the way I've heard it described, oftentimes veins and arteries are illustrated in blue and red to show oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. And so the switch off is like this. It's like you're going to be looking here. If we zoom into this, we're going to see that it's a single file. It's a very thin membrane, the capillary. And in the capillary, you're going to have red blood cells going through there. And these red blood cells are going to be dropping off the oxygen because they're oxygen carriers. And as they move through the capillary, they're going to pick up the carbon dioxide and move that along through the blood. So, and it'll also pick up waste, other things that are found in your bloodstream or in the cells, things that need to leave are going to be sent out there. So these red blood cells are the little carriers of the oxygen, and they're going to deliver them to different parts of the body. Okay, so we're going to have these capillaries picking up the oxygen. I think there's different spots in the body where capillaries are going to be dropping off or sending out the oxygen. But in this case, the oxygen's coming in and the CO2 is going out. So I kind of did those arrows in the wrong direction. So I hope you can fix those real quick. Okay. I want to put some information down here where it says diaphragm. I want to say that the diaphragm moves to allow the lungs to expand. Oops, that's an L. And I also want to point out that, again, and we've mentioned this before, is that humans, and we talk about humans' unique adaptations or things that make them special in the animal kingdom, is humans are adapted for long distance running. And so our lungs are able to keep moving even when other animals might get tire out and not be able to do much anymore. Humans are uniquely adapted to be able to keep moving for long distances. So, right, I then want to put down some different things that could go wrong in your respiratory system, and we'll just say that these are the diseases. Our first disease, and it's one that I'm sure several of you are really familiar with, is asthma. Asthma is one of the conditions that makes people more vulnerable to the current virus outbreak. Is asthma, because asthma closes up those air passages down deep in the lungs. It can be caused by allergies or from damage to the lungs. So asthma is the closing of the lung passages. So we think of this as something that can be triggered by allergies, pollution, strong odors even. And we talk about the bronchial tubes. Become inflamed. And they kind of squeeze in so that it's harder to get air into your lungs. There is a condition called COPD that older people get. And it kind of goes back to your lungs are delicate in nature, that one should not be inhaling chemicals, pesticides, smoke, any kind of environmental airborne thing coming in. There's lots of warnings. Like, for instance, if a person is using pressurized wood to build a deck, or pressurized wood, even cutting it with a saw, you're supposed to wear a mask. There are masks that prevent these little particulate matter from getting into your lungs, and it's really smart to wear them. There was a situation, I think, out here at my house where we were painting the house and we were using a sprayer, and it was really super windy the day that we painted our house. This was many, many years ago. And there was a lot of air that was filled with paint particles. And we did not wear masks, which was dumb, because certainly one should wear a mask anytime they're dealing with particulate matter. So that could be pressure treated wood, or it could be paint particles in the air, or even doing like drywall sanding, anything. And someday, you're likely to own a home, and you might find yourself doing this kind of work around the house, that little particles are flying around in the air. And then you'll have to make a choice. Should I put on a mask or not? And the answer is probably always yes. You put on a mask. Put on a darn mask. Even if you don't want to, because those masks prevent particles from getting into your lungs that can cause permanent damage to your airways, and you'll have a little cough or something bad will happen like that. And especially, for folks that not just are homeowners doing short little, one-time repairs, but if you're working in the industry where you're constantly working with any industry that's dealing with particulate matter, you're going to want to protect yourself from that and not inhale it. Even if you're the only one on your crew that it has a mask on, you be the one to wear the mask, because those particles over time can lead to severe issues. And it kind of goes back to, in today's day and age, if there's a disease going around that directly infects your lungs, people who already have these respiratory issues are going to be more susceptible to complications. And so we want to be careful. And there are situations also where people who either get just a regular cold, or some kind of infection, or perhaps allergies come, and those allergies can be inflamed, or over time cause an infection in your lungs known as pneumonia. Oops, there's a U there. Now, pneumonia is potentially deadly, in that it's an infection where it becomes incredibly difficult to breathe. So pneumonia is an infection of the lungs that makes it very difficult to breathe. And medical attention, the hard thing I think people have with pneumonia is knowing when it's important to get to the doctor, and maybe putting it off till the next day. And in some cases people die, and over something that is for the most part, kind of controllable. Most people don't have to die of pneumonia. They just do because they put off that trip to the doctor. So pneumonia is an infection of the lungs. It makes it very difficult to breathe. People who are older have a much harder time with pneumonia. But with the current virus that's going around, it's really the pneumonia or the virus that causes the pneumonia that is causing big trouble for people. Now, I have other stuff I want to talk about with the respiratory system, but I feel like I've gone on long enough for today. So let's stop here and answer the questions on the Google form, and we'll call it good for today. Okay? All right. Talk to you tomorrow.